North Korea, October 30th, 1950. The night sky erupts in chaos as Chinese forces launch a massive assault on the 8th Cavalry Regiment near Unsan. Amidst the deafening roar of gunfire and explosions, one soldier stands out, Corporal Ted Rubin. For 24 grueling hours, Rubin mans a .30 caliber machine gun. 3 previous gunners have already fallen, but Rubin remains. His last stand slows the enemy's advance, buying precious time for his comrades to retreat southward. Only when his ammunition is completely exhausted does Rubin's gun fall silent. As dawn breaks on October 31st, Rubin finds himself severely wounded and in the hands of the Chinese. His captors smirk, believing they've snared just another American soldier. But they couldn't be more wrong. Beneath that uniform lies a secret that will become their worst nightmare. Born as Tibor Rubin, this 21-year-old soldier carries with him a dark and secret history. He was a man forged in the fires of one hell, now ready to survive another. The coming months will test every ounce of Rubin's strength and courage. But for now, as he takes his first steps into captivity, one thought burns in his mind. The Chinese have no idea what's coming. Tibor Rubin was not born in the United States. In fact, he was born in Pashto, a small town in Hungary, on June 18, 1929. During his childhood years, Rubin's family lived a peaceful, idyllic life. However, as Hungary allied with Nazi Germany in the 1930s, they soon realized they had a serious problem. They were Jewish. As war broke out and the Holocaust intensified, Tibor's father and stepmother could see the writing on the wall. Worried for their young son's safety, they tried to send him to neutral Switzerland. However, their escape plan failed, and the Nazis captured him. The teenage Rubin was sent to Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria, around 12 miles east of Linz, where inmates were subjected to grueling slave labor under horrendous conditions. It quickly earned a grim reputation as one of the Nazis' most hellish work camps. Of the 190,000 prisoners held at Mauthausen and its subcamps, only half would survive. Arriving at the camp in March 1944, Rubin was lined up with the other new prisoners as an SS captain told them that none of them would get out alive. Rubin turned to the man next to him, quipping sarcastically, quote, "Nice fellow." Perhaps he was too young to understand the seriousness of the situation, or perhaps it was simply an early sign of the defiant attitude in the face of danger that would come to characterize him, the same spirit that enabled him to survive 14 unforgiving months in the bleak confines of the camp. Sadly, his family was less fortunate. His stepmother and sister lost their lives at Auschwitz, while his father shared the same fate at Buchenwald. Mauthausen was liberated by the U.S. 11th Armored Division on May 5, 1945. The sight of the uniformed American troops coming to save him left a lasting impression on the young Rubin, who felt he owed a debt to the United States, and he made a resolute promise to himself. Quote, "If the Lord helped me go to America, I'd join the army." With no family left, he soon set off to start his new life on the other side of the Atlantic, arriving in New York in 1948. His English was not yet good enough to enlist in the army, so first, he took jobs in the Hungarian immigrant community as a shoemaker and a butcher's apprentice. The following year, he felt he had acquired enough of the language to sign up, though unfortunately, his test scores said otherwise. But Rubin refused to give up on his ambition to join the army, and with a little help from his fellow test takers, he finally passed the test in February 1950. Now known as Ted to fit his new American identity, Rubin was accepted just in time to join the Korean War, which broke out on June 25th of that year when Communist North Korea invaded the U.S. allied South. As a private first class in the 8th Cavalry Regiment, he was among the first U.S. troops to arrive on the peninsula. While Rubin was proud to finally be able to serve the country that had saved his life, he was soon disappointed to discover that the feeling wasn't always mutual. The commander of Rubin's unit, First Sergeant Artis Watson, was a point in case. Rampantly anti-Semitic, he hated having a Jew among his troops and would often send him on dangerous missions in the hope that he would fail to return. Yet, much to Watson's disbelief, Rubin proved a tough nut to crack. No matter how dangerous the task, he just kept coming back. One such mission took place that summer, as the 8th Cavalry, overwhelmed by the North Koreans, attempted to make a retreat to the Pusan perimeter. At 4 a.m., while the rest of the men headed for safety, Rubin was given the unenviable order to stay behind and provide cover. For 24 exhausting hours, Rubin single-handedly defended a hill from the relentless waves of North Korean troops. Initially, he didn't think he would survive, saying, quote, "I figured I was a goner." But he soon developed a strategy to help him overcome the staggering odds. Cleverly moving from one foxhole to another, he used hand grenades to create the illusion of multiple defenders, a tactic aimed at confusing and slowing the enemy advance. His plan worked, and Rubin was able to inflict heavy casualties on the communist troops while allowing the 8th Cavalry to successfully escape. Rubin's impressive actions that day received high praise, and he received 4 recommendations for the Medal of Honor. However, any hope he might have had of being awarded the prestigious decoration was soon scuppered by First Sergeant Watson, who refused to submit the necessary paperwork on account of Rubin's ethnicity. Corporal Harold Speakman, a member of Rubin's company, wrote in a notarized affidavit, quote, "I believe in my heart that First Sergeant Watson would have jeopardized his own safety rather than assist in any way whatsoever in the awarding of the medal to a person of Jewish descent." Though frustrated by the discriminatory treatment, Rubin showed no signs of wavering in his commitment to protecting his unit. By October, having performed a bold amphibious invasion at Incheon, the UN forces were turning the tables on the North Koreans and were now steadily pushing them back over the 38th parallel toward China. However, this prompted the Chinese to intervene, swinging the pendulum back in favor of the Communists. Rubin and the 8th Cavalry had been among the units that led the charge into North Korea and were now about to feel the Chinese wrath. On the night of October 30th, Rubin, now a corporal, found himself at the center of a fierce attack as Chinese forces launched a massive assault. As his unit faced overwhelming odds and increasing casualties, Rubin took over a .30 caliber machine gun at the vulnerable southern end of their line after each of the 3 previous gunners had been overrun. Bravely manning the machine gun all through the night and into the next morning, Rubin fended off the enemy with dogged determination for as long as he could, managing to slow the Chinese forces down long enough to allow his unit to retreat, even as he was hit by shrapnel, severely wounding his leg. Eventually, he ran out of ammunition and was captured by the Chinese, along with hundreds of other soldiers. Together, they were forced to march to the infamous Pukchin prisoner of war camp, better known to American soldiers by its ominous nickname, Death Valley. By the time they got there, the new inmates, many of whom had been wounded in battle, were now also weak from hunger and exhaustion and unprepared for the freezing cold temperatures of the harsh Korean winter. To make matters worse, disease was rife, with many men succumbing to dysentery, pneumonia, or hepatitis. As many as 30 or 40 POWs would perish on a daily basis. Rubin would later say, quote, "Healthy men became like babies, helpless. It was terrible. Terrible." However, while his fellow soldiers struggled, Rubin stayed strong. While the Chinese hoped to break the inmate spirits, they were unaware they had a Holocaust survivor among them. Though Pukchin was undoubtedly a hell for all imprisoned there, Rubin had already been through far worse at the hands of the Nazis. What's more, his years in the concentration camp at Mauthausen had equipped Rubin with survival skills beyond the ordinary human experience. He had learned to craft nourishing soup from blades of grass and knew which weeds possessed healing properties. He understood that the human spirit could triumph under unimaginable conditions if the mind remained steadfast. What his fellow prisoners desperately needed, he realized, was hope. A glimmer of hope to propel them forward, and a robust hope to fuel their fight for survival. With this in mind, Rubin dedicated himself wholeheartedly to keeping his fellow prisoners alive. The first challenge was preventing them from starving, as food was extremely scarce. Rubin would later say, quote, "One potato would have been worth $1 million if any of us had had it to give." He began performing daring nighttime missions to steal food from the Chinese to take back and share among the inmates. Waiting for the rest of the camp to fall asleep, he would risk his own life under cover of darkness by courageously crawling on his stomach and jumping over fences while carefully avoiding detection by the heavily armed prison guards. Upon reaching the supply house, he would tie the bottoms of his fatigue pants and fill them with as much food as possible before making the perilous return journey back to the other POWs as stealthily as he could, knowing that if he were caught, he would almost certainly pay the ultimate price. Yet, Rubin's efforts to preserve his ailing comrades' lives did not stop at simply pilfering food supplies. He would debug prisoners of lice and do what he could to care for the sick and injured, administering medical care to all who needed it. One POW, Corporal James E. Bourgeois, had wounds which had become infected. The quick-thinking Rubin filled them with maggots to prevent gangrene from setting in, which Bourgeois credits with not only saving his left arm, but also his life. When some men were too critical to be treated, it was Rubin who would take on the responsibility of giving them a proper burial, asking the Lord to let them rest in peace. Unsure what to make of this unusually indefatigable prisoner, the Chinese paid close attention to Rubin until they eventually discovered his Hungarian origins. After World War II, Hungary had fallen behind the Iron Curtain and was now a communist satellite state of the Soviet Union. Seeing an opportunity to rid themselves of the troublesome POW and score a major propaganda victory against the United States, the Chinese offered Rubin the chance to return to Hungary, along with a good job, nice clothes, and as much food as he wanted. However, Rubin did not want to give them the satisfaction of a defection, and besides, he refused to abandon his men or his adopted country. Even though he had a free ticket out of the brutal prison camp, he declined the Chinese's offer, preferring to stay and look after those who needed his assistance. Rubin was transferred to Camp 5 at Pyeongtaung, where he continued doing whatever he could to help his peers. Though he had suffered a lifetime of discrimination, first from the Nazis, then from within the U.S. Army itself, there was no place for prejudice in his own mindset. Referring to the attachment he felt to his new homeland and the Hebrew word for a good deed, Rubin explained his actions by saying, quote, "I did it because I was an American, and because it was a mitzvah. Regardless of color or nationality, they were my brothers." Rubin remained in the camp until Operation Little Switch, an exchange of sick and wounded prisoners between the two sides that took place between April and May 1953, shortly before the fighting came to an end in July. He had endured nearly 2.5 years of imprisonment, during which time he's credited with personally saving the lives of over 40 inmates. Upon his return to the United States, he was finally allowed to become a citizen of the country for which he had done so much. Rubin was overjoyed, saying, quote, "I was the happiest man in the world." However, despite the incredible valor and selflessness he had displayed during the Korean War, as service medals were being handed out, he was once again overlooked. Rubin was not particularly bothered. He hadn't done what he had for recognition. He'd done it out of a simple sense of duty, and he slipped into a quiet civilian life in Southern California, getting married, having children, and working at his brother Emery's liquor store, eventually becoming a partner. Having long since lost contact with Rubin, most of the men from his original unit believed he had passed away. So when he unexpectedly appeared at a Korean War veterans reunion in 1980, he caused quite the sensation. Realizing he was still alive and well, his former comrades piled pressure on the army to revisit Rubin's war record. However, it soon became clear that this was not an isolated case. It seemed that many Jewish and other minority servicemen had suffered from the same discrimination, ending up with lesser awards or nothing at all, instead of the medals of honor they deserved. In 2001, Congress passed an act that led to the review of several veterans' wartime acts of valor, among them Tibor Ted Rubin's. Having been shown to have been a victim of prejudice, in 2005, 55 years after originally being recommended, Rubin finally received his Medal of Honor from President George W. Bush at the White House. With his trademark sense of humor that even years of suffering could not repress, Rubin commented, quote, "It would have been nice if they'd given me the medal when I was a handsome young man. It would have opened a lot of doors." He humbly added, quote, "The real heroes are those who never came home. I was just lucky." He is the only Holocaust survivor to have won a Medal of Honor.